My wife, Elaine, had ESP. No, really. I was skeptical at first, too, but over the years of our married life together, the number of times she predicted something before it happened was too numerous to discount it. She knew who was on the phone before we even answered the call. She would inexplicably tell me another route on the highway and then find the first route blocked. Purchase decisions would be delayed because she sensed something would happen to a particular item, which it almost always did. We both felt that her ESPs were real. Elaine was also very prone to daydreaming. Almost every morning she would wake up and tell me about a dream or dreams she had had during the night. Some of them were funny, but some were startling in their accuracy. It seemed that her dreams were another manifestation of her ESP. We learned to live with these gifts of hers. We married, of course, and had two beautiful children, John and Mary. At the time of writing this story, they have both gone to university, leaving Elaine and I at home to fend for ourselves. Then it got interesting when I noticed that Elaine wasn't jumping out of bed in the mornings to tell me about her dreams. It went on like this for almost 2 weeks. "Lainey, lately you haven't been telling me about your nightly adventures in dreamland. What's the matter?" I asked at breakfast. "Oh," she replied, a little embarrassed. "They were even too strange for me. I don't think you ought to listen to them," she added. Now every husband knows that such a comment is simply an invitation for further action. "Come on, Lainey. I've heard about these dreams of yours all our married life. Why do you have to stop now?" Because, she added hesitantly, because you might not like what you hear. There. I've said it all. Now please leave it alone." I was a little taken aback at this outburst on Elaine's part. It must have been very difficult for her to talk about it, since she even considered not sharing. Her dream themes were always pretty eclectic, so I never knew what I was going to get each morning. But this was something out of the ordinary. A list of things she didn't like to talk about ran through my mind. The death of her parents? The early scare with John right after he was born? Mary's mysterious one-night stand disappearance when she was 18? Her past boyfriends? Though we often talked about them and my girlfriends early in our married life. I knew I needed to leave it at that for now. I knew it would come out eventually, and all I had to do was be patient, like a good husband. Which, without blowing my trumpet too loudly, I basically was. I worked my entire working life as an accountant, and while the money I made wasn't fantastic, it was a steady income that provided our family with a middle-class life. I can honestly say that I was a balanced guy, slow to anger, but quick to the funny parts of life. Our home was always filled with laughter and good-natured fun. In those moments when I needed to be tough, I was. In raising two children, there are difficult times as well as periods of absolute joy. Elaine and I had a very comfortable relationship. After the white-hot passion of our early married life, we moved on to a more relaxed, unspoken partnership in which the old passions flared up from time to time. We both came to terms with this. We talked about these changes often, but agreed that we regretted nothing in the way our lives had turned out. Money was fine, health was fine, the promise of grandchildren sometime in the future, and the opportunity to travel. All good. Of course, this dream really tormented Elaine. The reticence continued for another 2 weeks until one morning, as I was making breakfast, she burst into the house and sat straight down on the floor. "Bill, I have to tell you about this dream. It's killing me." Elaine was almost distraught. We always discussed things with each other. Sometimes the telling was awkward and caused heated discussions. My poised nature perfectly balanced Elaine's emotion-filled stories. Usually our arguments didn't last long until we both reached a compromise, and we ended up laughing about them or enjoying our lovemaking. I poured the coffee, waiting for the story to begin. This should be interesting, thought I. I could see that Elaine was very nervous and was kneading her hands as she always did when she wanted to concentrate on something. "Bill, I had a dream that I would see James before I died. Before my life ended." Oh shit, I thought. She's having a premonition of her death? That's something new. Now I'm starting to worry. "Bill, I have the same dream every night. It's getting more and more insistent. I just can't get rid of it. You know who I'm talking about, don't you? James. James Sloop. The boy I met in New Zealand many years ago. Now she was looking at me with those desperate eyes I rarely saw in Elaine. I knew James Sloop, but I'd only met him once. It was the day after our wedding. The story goes like this. When Elaine was 18, she and one of her good friends joined a band that was touring the two main islands of New Zealand for 2 weeks. It was an exciting time for her. Elaine had traveled abroad many times before, but always with her parents. This was the first time she was practically on her own. The tour group was mostly a camping group where everyone traveled by bus. During the long bus rides, everyone spent a lot of time with other people. James was also in this group, and he and Elaine became very close during the tour. I didn't know Elaine very well at the time. We went to the same high school. However, I later saw pictures from the tour and realized that they were very close at the time. By the time I saw the photos, Elaine and I were already a couple, and I had to bury the notes of jealousy that tried to rise to the surface at the realization that the love of my life was intimate with another man. I had to rationalize it by realizing that it was in the past, and the present was different. I also had old girlfriends, and had to bury those experiences as well. I was a little pissed off when the day after the wedding we had to postpone leaving on our honeymoon until James could come and present his wedding gift. I only agreed because Elaine's entire family insisted that we wait. He flew in late from New Zealand and was only able to arrive in the morning. He had effectively missed the wedding. Poor James, coming all this way and not making it to the wedding, Elaine's mom remarked. She knew about James and Elaine, even more than I did, but she was happy with our decision to get married. I'd always had the impression that Elaine's mom would have been just as happy if Elaine had married James. However, it was just a feeling, but never stated outright. They always treated me with the respect a son-in-law deserves, and I always respected them. They were easy to bond with, and I truly loved them as my own parents. A well-oiled wedding reception was extremely important to Elaine's mom, and the thought of someone coming all this way and not seeing the happy couple in the end was almost unbearable to her. Bill, you just have to wait a little longer. There's no need to rush things. You'll have the rest of your life together. Elaine and I waited. As the airport cab pulled up to the driveway, I noticed a very handsome male figure climbing out of it. He was about my build with impeccably coiffed, almost blonde hair. His complexion was almost childlike, not a single blemish on his skin. I was amazed at how he could look so well groomed after such a long flight, but he was spot on. Elaine immediately ran up to him. You made it, James. I didn't think you'd make it. My primal instinct began to demand my woman, but the public nature of the scenario and everyone's oohs and ahs calmed me down somewhat. All the greetings were very heartfelt and embracing. He handed over a wedding gift, a leather bag, a darling. Great, I remember thinking. I'm sure I'm going to need it a lot. Then we left, never to see James again. Yes, Lainey, I do remember James. Okay, so the dream explained to you why you needed to meet him so urgently? I spun a yarn, trying to get Elaine to voice my dream. I had found in the past that if you could get her to do it, you could take away the anxiety that some dreams caused. No, that's what's so strange, Bill. There was no reason for it, other than a very strong feeling that I would see him before my life was over. It was a very real feeling, Bill. I've never experienced such a strong feeling in a dream before. I'm not kidding. I have to go. Well, that put me in a quandary. I knew that Elaine's ESP was a real and powerful part of her life, and now our lives. Those instances where we had acted on her intuition had ended well for us most of the time. But the funny thing about ESP is that you don't always get the full picture. It's more like driving a car with a dirty windshield. You only get glimpses of what lies ahead. History is full of examples of people relying on intuition alone to make major life-changing decisions. I knew I had to slow down that sense of urgency and let things happen gradually. We were both retired, so there was no physical impediment to traveling to New Zealand. After all, this country was on our wish list, and we were planning to go there in September, 9 months from now. I wondered if our conversations about a future trip had triggered a dream come true, but a nagging intuition told me it wasn't a good idea. Yes, I had a gut feeling too. Now that I'm older and my intuition has gotten bigger, my feelings have gotten bigger too. Huh. I walked over to her and hugged her tightly from behind. Lainey, I know you feel like this is necessary right now, but let's wait. We were going there in September anyway, so are you willing to wait until then? She nodded. Looking into her eyes, I realized that she saw the logic in waiting, but there was still desperation in them. We hugged for quite a while until she calmed down. I loved those hugs. They were always warm and cozy. I think over the course of our married life, we perfected the art of the perfect hug. Not too tight, not too loose, just comfortable enough to share our desire for intimacy. September couldn't come fast enough for Elaine. She had spent the time since her discovery to me like a woman possessed. She scoured every social media site looking for James. She found him and where he lived. She knew his profile by heart. Married. 3 kids, all grown, divorced. Lives alone in Queenstown, South Island. What a coincidence. Queenstown was where we hoped to stay during our NZ trip. She planned our trip meticulously. Tickets were purchased and hotels were booked. She then texted him to let him know where we would be and when. I was a little discouraged by this, but I accepted it because I knew how important it was to Elaine. She just needed to get rid of this visit. I knew from past experience with her that if it didn't happen so that she got closure, it would plague her for months. Besides, I trusted Elaine. We had been married for a long time, and she often told me romantically, "Bill, I know that if I'm not with you, I'll just die. My life will be over. You are my life and my love." These words and many others like them reinforced my trust in her. She has proven time and time again to be a loyal partner. Elaine is a good-looking woman and often attracts speculative glances from men. I had seen her in action more than once. She put these men in their place and then made sure to show them to their face our stable relationship. I knew deep down that the trust I had in her was real. I'm not one of those paranoid people who jump to conclusions at the mere hint of something out of the ordinary. I'll leave that to those couples whose relationships are shallow and on the fringe. Besides, her itinerary only listed one meeting with James, so it's not like that was the only reason for the trip. Maybe that was the reason that drove us to definitely go there, but we both had plenty of other reasons to visit the place. The Air New Zealand plane landed in Queenstown with 2 very excited passengers on board. Elaine was excited about everything she had planned, and I was excited about skiing at Remarkable's Mountain and visiting Glenorchy, where many of the Lord of the Rings scenes were filmed. I'm a fan of the series, and to be honest, it was one of the main reasons I wanted to visit NZ. We checked into our hotel overlooking Lake Wakatipu, a very romantic prospect. Almost immediately, Elaine was on the phone trying to get in touch with James. They got in touch, and we made arrangements to have dinner together that evening. The evening went surprisingly well. James behaved like an impeccable gentleman all evening and seemed to give me a lot of his time. I found that I really liked him. He seemed to know what to say and when to say it. He also knew when a topic was stalled and would deftly switch to something else. His childlike appearance as a teenager boded well for him in his more mature years. He looked at least 10 years younger than his actual years and was clearly in good physical shape. The mop of blonde hair that I remembered from the first time I'd seen him so many years ago now sat proudly on his head. He was dressed like a businessman. An aura of confidence radiated from him. He knew what he was doing. Elaine was happy to be in the background of our conversation most of the time, but I could see she was focused on what he was saying. We talked about our families and how our retirement was going. Any misgivings I had about this meeting quickly disappeared, and at the end of the evening, we agreed to meet again in 3 days. James's uncle owned a vineyard in the Otago area, and it just so happens that Elaine and I adore Pinot Noir wine. In order to fit it into Elaine's detailed itinerary, we had to forego one of the activities, but given the company and opportunity, it seemed worth it. James seems like a nice man, I commented as we undressed in our room that evening. He definitely knows how to charm an audience. He kept me engrossed in conversation all evening. He was a bit like a puppeteer who led us down different paths at will. He'd make a great used car salesman. I laughed, keeping the mood light. So, Lainey, what do you think? Was the visit worth it? He was definitely an entertainer, and you're right. He seemed to catch exactly the right moment to start a new topic of conversation. He read you like a book, Bill. I had a lot of fun watching and listening to the two of you. To answer your question, yes, it was worth it. He has changed a lot since we knew each other as 18-year-olds. He seems to have lost his halo of innocence, but I guess age does that to all of us. I'm glad we took the time to meet him. Thank you, Bill. I love you. I really appreciate what you've done for me. Now let's get into bed so we can really show each other how much we love each other. To tell you the truth, Lainey, it wasn't that hard tonight. I found myself succumbing to his charms little by little. I ended up liking him a lot. So what about the bed? The next day was devoted to skiing. Both Elaine and I love skiing. Admittedly, we're not so good at it, since our incomes don't allow us to plow the ski fields with the rich and famous. We put on layer upon layer of clothing to protect ourselves from the icy wind and joined the queue at the ski elevator. I foolishly decided to tackle the medium slope for those with a certain skill level, and Elaine, wiser, opted for the easy slope. I guess it was a man thing. The skiing at Remarkables was truly wonderful. The scenery was mesmerizing, especially since the town of Queenstown was visible in the distance. I started my descent and didn't notice that there weren't many skiers on my side of the slope. At first, I just wrote it off as luck, but as I looked further down the slope, I realized why. The slope I was skiing on ended with a section of very hard, slippery snow. I noticed it too late. I tried to slide sideways but lost control of the slippery surface. I was carried straight toward a clump of small trees that interrupted my fall. I also broke my leg. Fortunately, the resort's medical team were well trained in this and got me to Queenstown Hospital very quickly. Elaine hovered around me, cooing and cooing as the medics did their thing. It wasn't until I was safely placed on a bed in the general ward that we both looked at each other and laughed. The pain in my leg was intense, but the irony of our situation got through to us. Wow, Bill, you sure know how to have a vacation abroad, grumbled Elaine. I knew I hadn't planned this trip so carefully for nothing. The doctor says the fracture isn't too serious, but given your age, you'll have to spend at least 2 days here, and after that you'll have to walk around on crutches, maybe even in a moon boot. Hey, enough about age, old woman. I know it's throwing all our plans out of whack, but we'll see what we can do. I'm really sorry, Lainey. I should have realized my limitations on the slopes. But, and I put emphasis on that word, this is a great opportunity for you to do something you didn't include in your itinerary, but have been afraid to do. Shopping, I noticed, was not on the list. I know you love shopping. Here's a great chance to do what you want to do, shopping-wise, without my escort waiting outside every store while you look and buy nothing. Go ahead, woman. Go and shop. As I said this, we heard laughter and turned to see the nurse on duty, Courtney, struggling to suppress her laughter at my outburst. By this point, Elaine was already bursting into fits of laughter. That was one thing I loved about Elaine and I as a couple. After so many years together, we could still make each other laugh. It was an indication of our comfort with each other and our love for each other. All right, my husband, the task is set. 2 days of unbridled shopping for me, and you vacation at this beautiful hotel with meals and room service. Deal. What do you say, Courtney? Can I fill the next 2 days with endless shopping? Courtney looked seriously at Elaine and replied, This town is made for shopping, food after shopping, and parties after food. Elaine replied, I'm not sure about the parties, but shopping and eating are good. She turned to me again. Do you think you can make it to the vineyard with James? The threat of endless glasses of fine Pinot might do your leg good. Besides, if I'm going to spend our money on fine clothes and food, you'll have to get your share too. I'm not so sure, Lainey. The crutches might be a little restrictive, and the antibiotics might not work properly with the alcohol. We'll have to wait and see. but I'm serious. Go out and shop. The next morning, Elaine visited me at breakfast, and as soon as it was time for the many stores to open, left. See you tonight, dear, she said as she left the room. Courtney, the nurse, looked at her excited exit and commented, I hope your credit card has been charged, Mr. Yates. Everything in this town has a price for tourists. She chuckled and left the room as well. I didn't feel like sitting in front of the TV all day in a lonely hospital room, but regular visits from the nurses and housekeepers with food, offering me snacks and tea, helped pass the time. I got to know the different workers easily, especially Courtney, who was local. That evening, as I contemplated the neatly plated hospital dinner, an excited Elaine flew in to see me. Hi. How's your leg? You'll never guess who I ran into today? James. I think he's a bigger shopaholic than I am. We spent the whole day visiting every possible store. I promise I didn't max out my credit card. You should see the prices on everything. No, maybe you shouldn't. Your accountant brain will be on overdrive. But it was great to have a local guide. He knew all the places to shop and eat. It all came out in one voice, and then she sat up, kissed me, and relaxed in the chaise lounge next to my bed. We looked at each other, and then I answered her many questions. Hi, Lainey. It's good to see you. Yeah, my leg is fine. It's still a little sore, but they're giving me painkillers. The swelling has gone down, and the doc says that's a good sign. Maybe my advanced age isn't such a handicap after all. So, tell me about your shopping trip with good old James. She then went on to detail the events of the day and how James had helped her. She also informed me that James had promised to do the same the next day. I said that I trusted Elaine, however. A glint appeared in her eyes as she talked about that day. I had a suspicion that her excitement had to do with more than just the shoes she had almost bought. That evening, she stayed until 8 o'clock. As she was leaving, she turned to me and said, Guess what, Bill? I didn't have that dream last night. It disappeared. Isn't that great? I nodded and waved her off. That night, I slept the sleep of a stupefied man. Literally. My leg hurt a lot that night, which was apparently normal, so I had to get a painkiller shot. The next morning, I woke up realizing two things. First, the late hour, and second, the fact that Elaine was sitting next to the bed, looking very tired and nervous. Hi, sleepyhead, she whispered. I thought I was going to have to go shopping today without talking to you. The nurse said your leg was bothering you last night and had to knock you out with some miracle drugs. How is it now? The look of concern in her eyes made me feel a little sorry for her, so I didn't talk about the leg. Hey, Lainey, I mumbled inaudibly. I'm fine. Unfortunately, I'm probably going to be here a little longer. There are a few blood vessels that are bothering the doctor. She came in last night after scanning my leg. Apparently, there is a hint of a hematoma. I'll rest and take my meds. What about you? Did you sleep well? You look a little tired this morning. Did that dream come back? There was a slight hesitation that I didn't pay attention to at that moment. No. Bill, I didn't have that dream anymore. I'm so glad I did. It's been a part of my consciousness for so long that I find it strange that I don't see it anymore. Anyway, I was going to go shopping again today, but do you want me to stay here with you? You look a little worse than usual today. Lainey, I'm going to be bad company all day, I think. I'll be in and out of sleep while the meds work, and you go and do what we said. Store till you drop. Now go. I think they've already opened. She left the room again, and I slipped back into sleep and non-sleep. Nurse Courtney entered my fog several times. Your wife sure can dance, Mr. Yates, but I want to warn you about an old local who has seen all the sights and knows the people here. That man she dances and spends her time with is a snake. Be careful of him. That's what I tell you from personal experience. Then she left again. I wasn't sure if what I had heard was some kind of dream or not. However, I didn't have the consciousness to fully digest what was said, so I just fell asleep. I woke up to the smell of dinner waiting for me on my bedside table. The food helped me come to my senses, which probably wasn't a good idea. My leg hurt like hell. After dinner, I settled back on the pillows in that peculiar half-lying, half-sitting position. At that moment, Elaine came into the room. She looked tired and a little fidgety. "Hi, Bill. Sorry I'm a little late. How was dinner?" Then she kissed me on the cheek. "Hi, Lainey. The usual. They try their best, but it never compares to a home-cooked meal. How was your day? Do I need to get a part-time job when I get home to pay off my cards?" Elaine smiled. "No, Bill. James paid for almost everything today." Having said that, it was as if she stopped herself from saying more. There was an awkward silence for a while, until Nurse Courtney came in to give me an obby. Courtney looked at Elaine with the silent, knowing look that women seem to adopt from a very young age. Eventually, Elaine averted her gaze and spoke to me. "So, Bill, we have a visit to the vineyard and winery scheduled for tomorrow. I guess you won't be able to make it." "What a bummer, Bill. That leg is giving you a lot of trouble. I'll come tomorrow and spend the day with you." Having said that, she glanced at Courtney, who almost nodded in approval. What is it between them? I thought to myself. It's almost like a secret code of gestures and nods. I'll have to ask Courtney what's up sometime. Looks like I'm going to have to stick around for a while. I'd ask Elaine, but I know she was dying to go shopping. Absolutely not, Lainey. I really appreciate you coming. I miss your company, but I know there's nothing more boring than sitting in the hospital. I know you want to be here with me, but it's your holiday too. I'm sorry my stupid prank is wasting your time too. Go and have a good time at the vineyard. Promise me you'll bring back a case of great wine that we can share when I leave here. Elaine couldn't contain her delight. Okay, thanks, Bill. I'll see you tonight. Remember to treat the nurses well. And then she was gone. Courtney sat in the room for a bit longer and was about to get busy with someone else when I beckoned her over to me. Courtney, can I talk to you for a minute? She hesitated but stayed. I'm very sorry, Mr. Yates. I shouldn't have said anything to you before. I apologize if I said anything unnecessary. Courtney, you said something about my wife being a good dancer and having to watch out for that snake or something like that. I'm sorry, but I was a little out of it when you told me that. Is there anything I should know? And how do you know Elaine is a good dancer? Courtney turned noticeably pale, but still walked over and sat down next to the bed. Mr. Yates, what I'm about to tell you hardly want to hear. Last night my friends and I went to a popular nightclub in this town. It is known to all the locals as a cheap place to go to if you just want to dance. At about 9 o'clock, I noticed Mrs. Yates walk in. She was accompanied by James Sloop. He's well known in the neighborhood. He's got a taste for any woman he sets his eyes on. He came on to me once, and he was so good at what he did. Sweet talk. It was like I was under his spell. He's extremely good at it. I watched them for a while, and it was quite obvious that Mrs. Yates was intimate with him. She paused. I'm not sure I can say this directly, Mr. Yates, but she was very close to him. He had his arm around her most of the evening, and when it came to slow dancing, she was closer. It was like they were a couple. They left around 11, and I'm not sure exactly where they went. I'm so sorry, Bill. Can I call you Bill? I can't tell you this through nurse-patient protocol, but I feel like you should know. She suppressed a small sob and left the room. What the hell? I said out loud. This information caught me off guard. I never in a million years expected anything like this from Elaine. There had to be a perfectly innocent explanation for all of this. I trusted Elaine and had trusted her our entire married life. There was never any hint, implied or explicit, that she might leave me. She was the shining example of a faithful, loving wife and partner. She has been a wonderful mother to our 2 children, children who adore her for her resilience and love for them. I adore her for the same reason. She is my chosen partner in this life, and we, at least I thought it was a we, looked forward to spending our twilight years together, enjoying what life has to offer, together. This visit to James was just supposed to be a one-off. I liked the guy. He seemed trustworthy, and I was glad when he took Elaine under his wing while I lay here. I still felt guilty for ruining our vacation with my stupid accident on the slope. Could it really have all been a setup? There was no way my accident had been faked, so how had it escalated so quickly into what Courtney had detailed? Elaine isn't the impromptu type. It takes her a while to make a decision. This is definitely not like her. She only met with him 2 days ago. The first meeting was with me. He barely paid any attention to her. If he wanted to gain Elaine's favor, he would have courted her from day one. My thoughts were in turmoil, and my leg was hurting again. I called for the nurse, and Courtney came into the room. Are you always on duty here? You always seem to be here when I'm awake. What is it with you nurses? Courtney smiled and replied, Mr. Yates, we nurses work odd shifts. Sometimes I finish at 10:30 and start at 6 in the morning. Sometimes we have separate shifts. The system doesn't treat us very well, but luckily we like our job, looking after unfortunate people like you. What can I do for you? Is your leg bothering you again, or what I said earlier? She looked at me understandingly. I caught a glimpse of pity in her gaze. It was something I didn't need, but I wasn't about to vent my frustration on someone as dedicated and honest as Nurse Courtney. You're right. It's a combination of both, but I think only the leg can be managed with medication. I'll call the doctor on duty, and he can come and examine the leg. Just be patient, pardon the pun, because he has a few more people to attend to first. She was about to leave when I asked, Courtney, can I borrow the phone for a while? I need to make some calls. Sure. It's not exactly standard hospital procedure, but since there are no bedside phones in this room, I'll see if I can work something out. You're Courtney's angel, I said as she left. I've been called that before, Mr. Yates. Shortly after that, the doctor came in and examined my leg again. Your leg is healing, Mr. Yates, but there will probably be some residual pain as the blood vessels resume their normal function. I am pleased that the swelling has also reduced considerably. I will give you some pain pills, but I don't think an injection is necessary. Get some rest, and you'll be out of here in a couple days. Shortly thereafter, a cell phone was brought in. The orderly who brought it explained to me how to use it. He said that all calls would be charged to my account. He also gave me a hard copy of the local phone book. The first call I made was to our hotel. The receptionist was very polite, and fortunately for me, recognized me. The first thing she asked was how my foot was. I talked to her a bit about the accident and my recovery. In passing, I asked if my wife had caused any trouble, wild parties, etc., in the ward while I was away. I treated it as a light joke, and the receptionist continued in the same casual manner and joked, No, Mr. Yates, no big parties. She only had your brother last night. When she came in at 11:30, she introduced me to him. He seemed to me a very pleasant man. I think I've seen him here before. I thought he was a local, but you know how it is. We see so many people coming and going from here. When can we expect you back? I told her what the doctor had said and hung up. This wasn't quite the usual. Usually receptionists don't give this kind of information freely available. I wondered if maybe she, like Nurse Courtney, also suspected something was wrong and had warned me, but not in so many words. I was seething with rage as I put all the facts together. Elaine goes shopping all day with James, who helps her a lot. Elaine goes dancing with James. They are spotted being too close on the dance floor. As they leave, they kiss each other. Later that evening, they arrive at our hotel room together. The next morning, Elaine comes into the hospital room looking very tired but excited. Today, they will spend the day together again. This was not a good list. My emotions were centered on anger, and I could feel myself starting to slowly boil over. Combined with my complete disbelief in facts, it was amazing that I was in a state of logical thinking at all. It takes me a long time to get angry, as I usually find other ways to quiet these feelings. Chief among them is to sit down with my life partner and discuss the issues. Is that possible now? How do I approach Elaine? I needed to make sure I was on the right track before asking Elaine about it. If I was wrong, I would ruin our relationship by showing such complete distrust of her. She would be devastated by such a serious false accusation. The next call I made was to Elaine's cell phone. It went straight to voicemail, and I calmly asked how the shopping day had gone and that we would talk later when she arrived at the hospital at night. I then called the hotel receptionist again and asked her to let my wife know to call me as soon as she arrived at the hotel. I was about to give her the number of the hospital, but she interrupted me. "I can't do that, Mr. Yates. Mrs. Yates and your brother arrived here about 10 minutes ago and went straight to your room carrying a box of wine. They are there now. Would you like me to call you to your room?" I felt like my heart had stopped. My mind focused on the receptionist's voice and perceived nothing else. "They're already in the room, Mr. Yates." I couldn't believe it had come to this. What had happened to my Elaine? The woman I had known for so long seemed to have disappeared, and in her place was someone who looked like Elaine but had completely changed her character. It wasn't her. It wasn't her. The urgent voice of the secretary brought me out of my reverie. "Mr. Yates, Mr. Yates. Are you still here, Mr. Yates?" I mumbled some sort of reply and hung up. I didn't know what to do. I was stuck in this room while all of this was happening outside, beyond my control. What was I supposed to do? As I sat there like a fog, Nurse Courtney came in to give me an obese. "Mr. Yates, you look terrible. Are you feeling okay? Please lie down. I need to take your blood pressure, etc. Relax, please." She made me lie down and put a cuff on my arm. As the machine took a reading, she looked concerned. "Your blood pressure is too high, Mr. Yates. You need to relax. Is there anything I can do?" Her look was sincere, but it changed to a more concerned look when she realized I'd made several phone calls. "Does this have anything to do with what I told you?" she asked. I nodded grimly and told her what I had learned. "Oh, Mr. Yates, Bill, I'm so sorry. I knew I should have kept my mouth shut. It's all my fault. I started all these doubts and investigations." Now she was visibly upset. I told her that nothing was her fault, and that if she hadn't told me what she knew, I would have found out some other way. "Is there anything I can do to help Bill?" I thought about that question for a long time. What could a nurse stuck in a hospital do? She's just as stuck here as I am. It dawned on me that there might be a way to get proof of what Elaine was allegedly doing. I needed proof before I could do anything about it. "Courtney, do any of your friends have any free time right now? I'll pay them generously for their time. I need them to be free today and tomorrow." She thought for a moment, and then remembering someone, brightened. "Yes, Nicole, the nursing student, has the day off now. I'm sure she could use the extra money. You know how students are? What do you want her to do?" I told her what I wanted, and she immediately called Nicole with my suggestion. It must have taken some time to convince Nicole, but when Courtney mentioned payment, generous payment, the objections seemed to disappear. Damn. My leg hurt. That evening, sure as eggs, Elaine came in, bright as a button, clearly very excited. She had a smug, satisfied expression on her face. "Hi, Bill. Missed you today. How's your leg? You don't look so good." "Hello to you too, Elaine. Leg's a little better. Doc said I'll be discharged in 2 days, so I'm sorry. You can be alone for a little while longer." "Don't worry about it, Bill. I can take care of myself. By the way, the trip to the vineyard was a lot of fun. We spent the whole day there. It's amazing that I can walk straight after all those tastings." James and his brother gave me a tour of the entire farm. I'm so sorry you missed it. We got back just in time for me to get here. I must say, I'm very tired. Do you mind if I leave early tonight? I need to go to bed. You and I were planning on going to Glenorchy tomorrow, remember? The driver is still booked, so I'll go, and I promise to take lots of pictures for you. She got up to leave. Sure, and thanks, Elaine. I'll see you tomorrow night then. There's no point in coming here so early if you have to meet your driver. Love you and see you later. She lowered her eyes and replied, Love you too, Bill. Said I now knew for sure that everything that had been said about Elaine was true. She had blatantly lied to me about being in the vineyard all day. She hadn't. She had spent at least half the day in the hotel room with James. Her other words began to take on a different meaning. All these tastings. I have to go to bed. I'm so tired. It's amazing that I can walk upright. It was all quite innocent, but my state of mind was such that her words could no longer be trusted. What had Elaine, my Laney, done to my view of her? I spoke directly to Nicole and explained in detail what I wanted from her. She seemed almost excited about her task. I couldn't feel joy with her. What I was asking her to do was costing me a lot of money, and quite possibly costing me my marriage. That night I could not sleep. I tossed and turned, not because of my sore leg, but because of the constant pain in my heart. I thought with dread of the pain that was about to befall me and my family. How would I tell Elaine about all this if it were true? The severity of this accusation was greater than any quarrel we had ever had. The repercussions will last forever. What about our children? How will this affect them? I know I'll never be able to trust Elaine again. I've read about couples who have been able to put the past behind them, but damn it, this has touched the very core of our relationship. To give a damn about this exclusivity is to give a damn about love. If that were true, Elaine's every word and action would have to be questioned and tested for accuracy. What kind of relationship was this? Certainly not the kind of relationship I could participate in. I needed more proof. The next 2 days would show whether Nicole would be able to get what I so needed, yet so feared. As usual, the 2 days passed. The doctor gave me permission to go home to my hotel if I promised to take it easy. "No more skiing for you on this trip, Mr. Yates," he said as I left the hospital in my wheelchair, clutching my brand new crutches in my hands. The receptionist at the hotel greeted me like a long-lost friend and commented, "We hope you can rest easy here, Mr. Yates. The room has been specially cleaned and refreshed for you." Having said that, she winked at me in a way that Elaine didn't notice she had done. "There's also a welcome drink and some appetizers for you to eat. Enjoy." Then she went back to her computer, not even paying attention to Elaine. The elevator ride was grim. Elaine tried to make small talk but soon realized I wasn't in the mood. Perhaps she chalked it up to my being in the hospital and my inability to enjoy my vacation so far. How wrong she was. As soon as I entered the room, I asked Elaine to turn on the TV. "Don't you want to sit with me for a while before you watch this?" she asked. "I would have thought you had enough of that at the hospital." "You're right, Elaine," I replied. "No more Laney now. I just need to plug something in if you don't mind. I can't reach it in this wheelchair. Here it's a USB, it plugs into the side connector." By this time the TV was on. I took the remote and switched the signal source to USB. A blank screen appeared on the screen. "Very cool, Bill," said Elaine, trying to be funny. "So that's what you were watching while I was shopping." "Elaine, please sit down." The tone of my voice told her that something was wrong. As if in a trance, she sat down, staring at the blank TV screen. "Elaine, I want you to tell me what you were doing while I was in the hospital." Her face paled, but she managed to pull herself together. "I'm waiting, Elaine." "Bill, you know what I've been doing. What's all this about? I've been shopping, visited the vineyard, and today I stopped by Glenorchy for you to take some pictures." "Cut the crap, Elaine!" shouted I. This time she actually turned pale. In all our married life, I had never yelled at my wife in anger. "I want you to tell me what you and James, the asshole, were doing while I was in the hospital." "Bill, oh Bill," she sobbed. "We spent time together. Probably more than we should have, but it seemed so right while we were together. We had a great time. He's such a fantastic entertainer." I laughed at his jokes. I loved that he knows everything about Queenstown. "He helped me so much while you were in the hospital." She paused and looked at me with reddened eyes. "I'm sorry I spent more time with him than I told you, but—" I didn't let her finish. "You think I want to hear about shopping and sightseeing?" Using the remote, I switched to the first slide on my USB drive. On it was a picture taken last night at the club. Nicole had done a great job capturing what was going on. The picture showed two people dancing very close to each other. You could see them kissing. Elaine gasped. She couldn't take her eyes off the screen, sobbing slowly. Bill, I don't know what to say, she whispered. Just tell me. It was you and James last night at the dance club, Elaine. I shouted again. Yes, Bill. Yes, it was them, Elaine almost whispered. I'm so sorry, so sorry. That's all it was, Bill. I didn't let her finish. Elaine, your promises mean nothing to me. I put up the next slide. This time, it showed a picture of a happy couple outside the club. It was on the patio, which was usually reserved for smokers. It was quite obvious that they were having fun there, doing it in a public place. What? What were you going to say, Elaine? Were you going to promise that all that happened was an overly close encounter on the dance floor? Is that what you were going to promise? Did you say promise? My anger was starting to take over, and if I wasn't careful, I was going to do something I would regret later. I had to get my emotions under control. Elaine was sobbing by now, with her head down on her hands, rocking from side to side and moaning, "No, no, no!" I rolled over to the bar fridge and pulled out a beer. Nothing for Elaine. My anger at her was so deep that I no longer saw her as Elaine. She was turning into this cheating, lying, low bitch. I continued. Thanks for the pictures of Glenorchy today, Elaine, but I had pictures of my own. I flipped through the slides, lingering on each one long enough to show that there was no doubt what James and Elaine had been doing all day. It was on the third slide that Elaine collapsed to the floor. I was concerned about her condition, but I was angry with her in a way I had never been angry with anyone or anything in my entire life. I considered leaving her in that state and leaving the hotel, but I needed to know. The ice bucket from the refrigerator spilled out of her face with a loud splash. Elaine came to her senses and groaned. She wrapped her arms around her shoulders and fell into a fetal position, still lying on the floor. I picked her up off the floor and unceremoniously dumped her on the bed. She began to repeat in a monotone voice over and over, "No, Bill. I'm so sorry. I love you." Your promises and love mean nothing to me right now, Elaine. I want to know how it happened and why. How you managed to muck up our marriage so quickly and so openly. The children. My God, what are we going to tell the children? Why Elaine? Just tell me why. Did I do something to make you disrespect not me, but our love for each other? Our love. Our beautiful love that we felt every day. You gave it all up for what? Just to have fun with that asshole? Why Elaine? Tell me why. I screamed again. If I didn't tone it down, the hotel management would soon be here. How did this happen, Elaine? I whispered. Tell me how. I've always loved you, and I thought you loved me just the same. She continued to hug herself as if she felt safe. I don't know, Bill. I honestly don't know. One minute I felt fine in James's company, and the next I started to become enamored with him. He knew everything that needed to be said, everything that needed to be done. He made me feel like a queen, a princess, his princess. All his words sounded just right. I wasn't going to fall under his spell. It just happened. I think it happened that first day of shopping. After our night out the night before, I felt very at ease with him. My guard was down. He was great with you, and I know you are usually a good judge of character. Part of me was saying to myself, if you're fine with him, I can be too. I'm not blaming you, Bill. Please don't think that because of what I just said. Her eyes pleaded with me. She wanted to continue, but broke into sobs again. Damn it, I was so angry at her and her stupidity. I was tempted to get her a drink and some tissues, but only for one fleeting second. I left her alone and continued. Bill, James was so preoccupied. By the end of that first day when we were shopping and wandering around town, I was in his arms, literally. He started touching me every chance he got. I felt so at ease with him that these touches didn't even give me Letcher's anxiety. The touches became so familiar that I began to miss them when he was away. I'm ashamed to admit that I looked forward to his light touches here and there. By the end of the day, he had his arms around me almost constantly, and his hands were gently massaging my waist and lower back. Bill, I'm sorry, but I was back to our youth and the time I spent with him on the tour. I was happy that I could feel this way with him again. The more he talked and touched, the less I thought of you. Sobbing and almost sobbing again. How could I have forgotten about you, Bill? Looking back now, I'm so ashamed of what I thought, or rather didn't think. That night, he asked me to a dance at the club. Before that, I would never have dared to go to such a place without you. But then again, James knew all the right words to say. He put me at ease almost immediately. He bought me drinks, not that I was drunk, but it definitely felt good. His constant touch and presence became habitual, and before I knew it, we were dancing very close. The whole time he was whispering to me about how good I looked, and how right he felt at that moment, and how he missed me and wanted us to be together. I think the combination of his constant compliments, the booze, and his all-consuming intimacy finished me off. By the end of the night, we were inseparable. Bill, how could I do that? You are the love of my life, and I could still stoop so low. When he finally drove me back to the hotel at what seemed like an ungodly hour, I spent what seemed like hours in the shower. I wanted to wash away all traces of what had happened, especially before I saw you again. I almost died when you commented on how tired I looked when I saw you the next morning. But Bill, I was still looking forward to the day I would see James again. What's wrong with me? She began to knead her hands and beat her head anxiously with her open palms, as if she wished she could wake up from some terrible dream. I still wanted to see him again. I damn well wanted to see him again. He picked me up from the hospital that morning. I had fallen under his spell again. We had dinner at some secluded cafe, off the main street. It was more suitable for a young married couple than for him and me, but I felt we were a couple. How ugly was that? I loved the attention he gave me, and I craved more. She was almost screaming now. The enormity of what she had done was beginning to dawn on her. It didn't make me feel any better, but I knew I had to know the rest. With every word she said, with every sneaky detail she confessed, I grew angrier, but I still let her continue. My silence must have bothered her, but she continued. After breakfast, he invited me into town again. I recognize my duplicity in all this, Bill. I promise you that I am honest. I know my words mean nothing to you right now, and I don't blame you one bit. I know I've hurt you to the core, and I honestly don't know how I can mend that hole in your heart. And sobbing again. He started kissing me every chance he got. It got to the point where I wanted him to just entertain me and be done with it. But he led me on most of the morning. I felt like his princess. He was a knight in shining armor, but in my mind I wanted him more than anyone else. And he knew it. He played me like a musical instrument. He was the master musician, and I was his toy. He knew exactly when he had me and wasted no time in inviting me to his house. Like a robot, I accepted. I didn't think about anything else. It was like I was someone else, a true, loving, faithful mother and wife gone. Well, that's what happened. We got into it. I had to stop. I should have seen you. The guilt of what I had done began to surface, and I got out of there as soon as I could. I got home, took a shower, and tried to gather my thoughts. What did I do? Stop, Elaine. You've betrayed everything we promised each other. I could barely speak. You showed up at the hospital every day and every night pretending everything was fine while you entertained each other behind my back at every opportunity. There's no fixing that, Elaine. It can't be fixed. I don't know where we go from here, but I don't think I can ever undo what I've seen and heard. I needed to hear from you about what you and James the shithead did. When you tried to whitewash everything at the beginning of our conversation, I realized that part of you still thinks there's nothing wrong with what you did. Why would someone like Shithead think it's okay to trample on someone else's marriage just to get a little entertainment? I learned that he has such a reputation here in Queenstown. He has ruined countless marriages. That's why his wife divorced him. He was flirting with her from the beginning. Then Elaine did something that drove the final nail in the coffin of our marriage. She defended him. Bill, no, it wasn't like that. I asked James why he was squinting at me like that. He said that ever since we met as teenagers, he'd had a crush on me. He said the worst thing he did was let me go back then. If he had money, he would have followed me home and continued the relationship we so innocently started back then. He always thought of me, even when he got married. He was never satisfied with that marriage. He wanted more, and that probably explains why he fought, why he went off to other women. When I informed him of our visit, he was thrilled, and that's why we are where we are now. She looked at me again with pleading eyes. I couldn't believe this nonsense. Elaine had actually sided with him in all of this. She was trying to justify what they had done as a result of their betrayal relationship all those years ago. Unbelievable. What about you, Elaine? Why did you choose to do what you did? Don't tell me you felt the same way he did. I'd really like to know. Elaine began kneading her hands, which was so familiar to me. She concentrated. Bill, that first day was like he flipped a switch in me. He transported me back to my younger years. Like a switch, he either turned it on or off. When he flipped that switch, it was on and we, meaning you and I, were off. I can't explain it any other way. Anger at his situation was beginning to take over from guilt. Entertaining James was a wild ride, Bill. She paused, realizing what she had just said. The conversation was over. I had heard and seen enough. That last remark sent my emotions into a state of despair at what my love had just said and done. You need to leave, Elaine. You need to leave now. I'll call the front desk and there will be a cab waiting for you in 10 minutes. Get your shit together and leave. I don't care where you go, just as long as you get away from me. I turned away from her. Elaine hesitated, but knew better than to argue. She did pull herself together, still muttering. No, Bill. You are my life. Without you, my life is over. My life is over. My life is over. A cab came, and she was gone. As she said goodbye to Mrs. Yates, the receptionist smiled knowingly. She had seen it many times before, but she still had to be polite to the hotel's customers. I pondered Elaine's words and got angrier and angrier. I knew I had to do one more thing. Courtney, how are you doing? Nice to catch you on your own time. What's that? No, it didn't go well, and that's why I'm calling you. Can you get me a list of all the married couples that the asshole that is James has broken up? Okay, thanks for trying. By the way, tell Nicole I was very impressed with her work. I'll be at our hotel if you manage to find out anything. Okay, bye. 2 days passed before Courtney left a large envelope for me at the front desk. When I opened it, I realized how much work she had put into it. Courtney, you're just an angel, I whispered, addressing no one in particular. There were about 30 couples listed here. Some were still married, but most had separated or divorced. Courtney listed the phone numbers of almost everyone affected. This was gold. I had a few calls to make. 2 days later, I got on a plane and headed home. I was able to see Glenorchy. I wanted my visual memories of the place to be pure and innocent, not the sordid picture that Nicole's photos had revealed to me. At home, I contacted the attorneys to begin divorce proceedings. My children were not impressed with the way things had turned out. They were shocked to the core. None of them could understand how their mother, their reliable, stable mother, could have gone to such low acts. I didn't bother to explain anything. I would leave it up to the bitch. That's what I thought of her now. I wasn't just cursing with anger. I was labeling what I saw, coldly and logically. I was utterly baffled at how a warm, loving, compassionate, caring, loyal human being could, at the flick of a switch, to use the bitch's words, resort to such animalistic behavior. It bothered me so much that it overwhelmed my days. I ended up seeking counseling for this and some of the other issues our divorce brought up. It helps me get over the anger and confusion from the whole messy story. However, it didn't help me deal with the loneliness. There was no more laughter in the house. Almost every morning I woke up, went to the kitchen and set down 2 cups of coffee, expecting Elaine to come in and tell me about her dreams. God, how I missed the old Laney. But not those dreams. Not those damn dreams of hers. John and Mary, bless their heart, see my loneliness and spend as much time with me as possible. I may even sell the house and move closer to where they are studying. They turned into city dwellers and were in no hurry to move out of there. Our divorce went off without a hitch. I was able to compensate Elaine for her half of the house. I packed and shipped all of her belongings to New Zealand, where she was living with Shithead. I may have accidentally wet some of her clothes, okay, all of them, before packing everything into garbage bags and boxing them up. Every picture she asked me to send, I carefully tweaked so that it was just of her, and a picture of a female dog. I thought there was a certain amount of justice in that. That bitch had ruined our marriage, so... I heard from Courtney not long after our divorce was finalized. Apparently, all was not well in asshole and bitch land. James decided that he could now leave Elaine. Old habits die hard, and Elaine was not impressed. Funny. A cheater doesn't like being cheated on. Also, apparently James the Hog apparently didn't like Elaine explicitly telling him that he had to stop it. He slapped her around a few times. Enough to put Elaine in the hospital, which meant Courtney knew the state of their affairs. Courtney told me that in her sleep, Elaine mumbled over and over again, "My life is over. My life is over." Elaine slipped into a state of depression and went on sedative medication. The newspaper article only mentioned the incident in the latest international news section. An apartment belonging to Mr. James Slope was burned down in a botched robbery. It is believed that a group of armed men, unknown to the police, entered the apartment and attacked the owner, ransacking it. In their haste to leave as the owner lay unconscious on the floor, the group set the apartment on fire. Unbeknownst to them, a woman was also in the apartment in a state of sleep. Both occupants died at the scene. I read the article and felt a weight lifted off my shoulders. I didn't want them to die, but sometimes karma can be a bitch. Of course, karma needs a helping hand sometimes. Of the 20 or so jilted men I had socialized with before I left New Zealand, a great many had been drinking together at a local drinking establishment and discussing their person of interest in failed marriages. I put the newspaper aside and said aloud to the spirit of my deceased ex-wife, "You were right, dear. Your prediction was somewhat accurate. You did see James, and now your life is over. Really over. But when you saw James, you didn't notice that our life, in which we had invested so much love and time, was also over." The end. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. So subscribe to my channel and watch the next video.